Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to An Unexpected Killer.
November the 17th, 2016. In Loxahatchee, Florida, police receive a 911 call. A man has been stabbed, and his condition appears critical.
I need an ambulance service. Somebody came in and stabbed my son, and he's bleeding. He's almost unconscious. Please get there.
Ma'am, I have them on the way. I need you to calm down.
Those two blood vessels, the artery and vein, they are cut, so now the heart is still beating and blood is pumping out. So he's losing blood, he's bleeding out from his wounds.
He was stabbed some 7 times. The death blow was the clavicle or collarbone, which caused him to bleed to death.
As police launch an investigation, it becomes evident that this is no random incident. The attack is vicious and sustained.
Where is the person that stabbed him?
We don't know. The front door is open. They came in. I was sleeping, and his friend was over, and his friend woke up and found him stabbed.
Okay, how
I thought I knew anger and hatred before, but that's when I really met that.
Loxahatchee is about 20 miles west of West Palm Beach. It's a rural community with many large houses on big plots of land. There's even a small safari park in the area. In general, it's a quiet area.
It is rural, large lot sizes, everything is it's called the acreage, so everything is an acre to more out there. It is slowly getting more and more developed, but it is more rural than, say, downtown West Palm Beach. You've got all types of people that live out there. It really is a melting pot. Business owners, small business owners, construction business owners, but single family residences. You have people that live out there that just want more space. So it really is a melting pot of sort of everything out there.
A lot of people who enjoy nature tend to flock to Loxahatchee or the outdoors, such as hunting. But it's a rather quiet area, a little more far removed from the hustle and bustle.
But all of that changes on a November night in 2016.
911. What's the location of your emergency?
I need an ambulance service. Somebody came in and stabbed my son, and he's bleeding.
Who came in and stabbed your son?
Right now, he's bleeding.
Okay. Who is it?
It's my son.
The call has been made by Nicole Barry. Her son James is the victim.
She made the 911 call, but if you actually listen to the 911 call, you can hear everyone in the room is on the call. Essentially, she's the one who dials, but her live-in significant boyfriend, Guy Hand, is on the phone as well, speaking, and they're all just trying to give as much information, get as much information at the time.
You could just hear emotions running high. There was a lot of commotion in the background. Nicola just describing to the best of her ability the sequence of events and the dire need for help.
Where is he stabbed at?
He's stabbed at my shoulder.
Okay, how? Ma'am, I had help on the way. SW on the line? I'm still here.
Knowing what's going on, what we know now, what was happening in the bedroom. So it's Nicola, Miss Barry, narrating what she's seeing and trying to listen to the 911 dispatcher to try to help her son at that point.
What is that vein, guys?
By his neck?
Jugular vein.
Okay. Someone has a cloth to put pressure on?
Yes, we have it right now. Please get it.
it sort of became apparent throughout the call that, he was dying. So, you definitely hear the panic in her voice and trying to do everything she can.
Is he breathing? You don't know?
I need to know if he's not breathing. Okay. No, sir, I have them on the way. I need to know if he's unconscious, right?
He's unconscious, yes.
Is he breathing?
No, he's not breathing.
When the police arrive, they immediately seal off the house and tend to James Barry.
Palm Beach County Fire and Rescue and the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department responded to the scene. The paramedics arrived, but then the officers went in first to the home.
You enter in through the front door. The bedroom was down a small hallway off to the left.
You could see the blood was on the hallway walls, and so they could see that, and they enter the room and they see James bleeding, and they see Guy trying to provide aid.
At that time, Guy Hand still had James on the bed and was trying to perform CPR at that point.
Then they take over, and that's when they move James to the ground.
But it is too late. James Barry is already dead.
James Barry suffered 7 stab wounds. 7. One fatal blow to the chest, which severed 2 arteries. He also had a stab wound among those wounds to his lower left abdomen and his right thigh. There were also some wounds on his hands, which indicated that there was, in fact, a struggle involved.
Copious amount of blood in the bedroom itself, some cast-off spatter in the hallway. It would have been a very chaotic scene.
Forensic experts now examine the scene.
When crime scene investigators started gathering evidence, they saw a pink cell phone. They found some blood splatter, and of course they gathered that evidence well, and they found some linen garments as well.
Most telling was when the police came in, they saw the knife, steak knife, covered in blood next to the kitchen sink, nowhere near the blood splatter and nowhere near the body.
This raises questions for the police.
Somebody was trying to clean the murder weapon, because the only reason you put a knife next to the kitchen sink is to wash it.
It transpires that this person is Guy Hand.
It is unusual to think, why would anyone want to touch a murder weapon? That has to run through your mind. Why would someone in their right mind go and move a knife when someone is bleeding? However, he claims that he just acted out of instinct. He needed to get it out of the way, get it to a place where it was just, he said, I'll put it on the counter. I don't want anyone else getting hurt. So his explanation was that he just kind of let instinct take over and he got it out of the room.
Yes, Guy Hand had blood on him, but given the scene and given what he was trying to do to save the life of James Barry, he should have had blood on him. In other words, it was not unexpected that he had blood on him.
James's body is then taken for autopsy. The body undergoes a standard procedure undertaken in every homicide.
You look for clues, you look for evidence, things that help you piece together what happened in the last moments of a person's life. At that point, you move off to the medical examiner's building next door, which is where we actually have the morgue. And then the detective is there and the crime scene investigator is there. The body is brought in. It's in a sealed body bag so nobody can tamper with the body. And then the body seal is broken, opened up. Everything is photographed as is. Samples are taken for DNA, for example. There are bags on the hands to protect them from trace evidence or maintain the trace evidence that might be on the hand. And everything is photographed as is. Eventually, clothing and things like that are removed from the body. And the whole time I'm taking notes, and more tech is taking photographs with rulers and things like that. And then at some point, I look at the body as is and examine the injuries. You also have to clean off the skin as well because blood obliterates details on injuries. And And then the second part, once we've done all that and photo documented everything, the second part is where I take surgical instruments and I open the person up and look to see what's going on the inside.
In James's case, there were clear signs of a struggle.
There were defensive wounds on his hands, for example, where he's trying to protect himself from being stabbed, so he's got cuts in his fingers, cut across the back of the hand. He's got a superficial stab wound in his abdomen on the left side. He's got a stab wound in his thigh, a couple stabs in the back, and he's got a lethal stab wound on the left side of the chest, quite big. It enters on the left side of his chest and comes across. This is from his perspective. And it cuts through two large blood vessels, a vein and an artery that are the size of a pencil. Those two blood vessels, the artery and vein, they are cut, so now the heart is still beating and blood is pumping out. So he's losing blood, he's bleeding out from his wounds, especially the one up here. But he's also collecting blood on the right side of his chest, and his lung is damaged too. So his blood fills up on the right side of the chest, it compresses the lungs, making it harder and harder for him to breathe. In addition, as the blood is collecting on the right side of his chest and compressing those lungs, it's pushing everything over into the left side, which then kinks the large blood vessels that come off the top of the heart, slowing down or cutting off the blood supply. So now nothing is being pumped to the brain. He's not getting enough oxygen to the brain, and he passes out at some point and just never wakes up again.
As the body of James Barry is being analysed, police begin to establish who had been in the house on the night he died.
The mother and the boyfriend, Guy Hand, were trying to sleep in the master bedroom. The friend and the deceased were in the same room playing video games. Something drew the attention of the deceased, who went out and came back bleeding and stabbed.
Guy Ham said that he woke up to commotion. He saw James in the bedroom bleeding profusely, and he jumped into action.
The attack on James Barry had been vicious and sustained. Detectives needed to find out who had killed him and what their motive might have been. In November 2016, police in Florida are trying to establish what had happened to James Barry on the evening he was murdered at his home in Loxahatchee, a rural area close to West Palm Beach. His autopsy attests to the violence of the assault on him.
James Barry suffered 7 stab wounds. 7. One fatal blow to the chest, which severed 2 arteries. He also had a stab wound among those wounds to his lower left abdomen and his right thigh. There were also some wounds on his hands, which indicated that there was, in fact, a struggle involved.
The attack on James had extinguished the life of a promising young man.
He was honestly your perfect son, your perfect brother, your perfect friend. He was a saint. He was just a person that you had to have just met. If he was still alive, it would be nice, because he really loved just life, and he loved nature, and he loved animals, and he loved gaming. I mean, gaming was his biggest thing, but he never caused trouble. He never snuck out. He never did drugs. He cancer.
Her name is Melanie Eam, and she had been James Barry's girlfriend.
Jim Barry, James's dad, was convinced that Melanie was to blame. He said, "She is the one who killed my son."
And there is evidence that Melanie had been on the scene that night.
When police responded to the scene and they conducted their surveillance, neighbors actually saw Melanie Eam's car speeding from the neighborhood after midnight. So there were reports that she was actually in the neighborhood that evening.
Their mutual love of gaming had brought them together.
He met her initially through gaming, and then they had one of their first dates at the South Florida Fairgrounds, and they found out they went to the same school.
She was pretty dynamic personality as far as her love for him was concerned. However, she was very quiet and calm by nature. Family members say she really didn't have that much to say. However, James's sister describes her as being quite possessive, to the point where she even wanted to take college classes with him and always needed to be with him.
To me now, when I look back, like that was a red flag. Like it's not normal for me to hear other couples having to take the same exact course with the same exact teacher. I mean, it's just not. I don't hear it every day.
But there was a rival for James's attention.
I do remember that she had issues too with James's friends, and particularly there was one that she had a really big problem with.
The person in question was James's best friend, Jeff Jarzabkowski.
Melanie was very jealous of Jeff's relationship with James, their friendship. She did not appreciate, and she was jealous of circumstances when James would hang out and take time away from her spending with Jeff. So at the time of the incident, they were not socialized, the three of them, James, Melanie, and Jeff together.
James and Jeff had been friends since childhood. They both lived under the same roof with James's mother.
Jeff, who was James's best friend, let investigators know that he had learned about an hour before the murder that James was, in fact, going to call off this relationship with Melanie Ann. It was a tumultuous relationship, an on and off again relationship, and at this point, James told Jeff that he was ready to call it quits on this relationship. This was about an hour before the murder happened. Jeff shared that with investigators.
As detectives start to gather more information, they discover that it wasn't the first time James had been looking to end the relationship.
He had tried to break up with her before, and she would get jealous or angry or frustrated or just in denial about the fact that he was going to break up. Melanie felt that Jeff encouraged James to break up with her. So in response, at the time, Jeff had a very expensive fish tank with fish in it. And at that time, Melanie poured bleach into the fish tank, killing the fish as well as destroying Jeff's property.
She saw an opportunity to get him out of the house, and how to do that. She had to pour the bleach in the fish tank, and then from what my mother said, she didn't admit to it till 2 days later after the fact, with no regard, with no emotion, no I'm sorry, but I did it.
That kind of goes hand in hand with just her volatile nature and sort of irrational actions when she gets angry.
They had broken up one time before, and Melanie just lost it to the point where she became suicidal, according to her parents. In fact, her mom went to James's house begging him and begging his family to not end the relationship, that she quite honestly couldn't handle it, and they didn't know if she would survive the breakup.
James was a kind soul and did not want her to inflict any harm on herself, so he agreed to get back in a relationship.
It appears Melanie had firmly embedded herself into James's world.
Melanie Eam really enjoyed the nicer lifestyle that being with James's family afforded her. She could go on family vacations. When she was with the family, she enjoyed time in their home. She would even use their kitchen. She would bake. She liked the lifestyle that James Berry and his family had to offer her. And she didn't want to give that up, not at any cost.
The evidence was that she really wanted to be a part of that family. And if you look at the situation that James had, I mean, he was in a very loving household. He had a great friend. He had transportation. both parents, a mother and a stepfather that cared very deeply for him, and really spoke to Melanie E. not being a part of that anymore. So not only was it just James, I mean, she obviously wanted to be with James, but it was not being part of the family. And so I think that hurt her very, very deeply. And that's what I think she held on to. And I think she also saw Jeff as a little bit of a threat to that. Anybody that was with James when she wasn't with James, I think was a threat to that. If you look at the photographs of the two of them, just the still photographs, you'd look at it and go, look, they look like such a cute couple. And I think she feared losing all of that to a breakup.
Police now begin to look at a specific piece of evidence taken from the crime scene.
She left a piece of evidence behind at the home that was of paramount importance, and that would have been her cell phone. And we ultimately did a cell phone extraction from, and that was a key piece of evidence that really implicated her as a person that we should be looking at.
On the night of November the 16th, James decides to end his relationship with Melanie.
He had told my father that night that he broke up with Melanie, and one of the last messages that he wrote is, "It's gonna hurt a lot."
It was done through a third-party app, a gaming app called League of Legends. So we had to actually get into the physical device, the physical phone, and go into the third-party app to find those conversations. And really what it was evidence of James telling Melanie that he felt that they should go their separate ways. You could tell that he was childlike in his ability to sort of communicate his feelings. She seemed very angry, one, that they were breaking up at all, and two, she seemed angry that it was being done in that fashion via a League of Legends chat. And at one point she said, "I can't believe you're breaking up with me over a League chat." And his reply to that was, "Well, I could talk to you in person, I just communicate better like this." It was a good 4 or 5 pages, screenshots of the conversation, so the breakup was clear. And that breakup terminated, and the last message was approximately 9:08 p.m.
It's November 2016. Following a relationship breakup via text message between Melanie Eam and James Barry, Melanie travels to James's house to confront him.
She went to the house. There was no sign of a break-in. One of the things that we certainly looked for was there any windows broken, doors jimmied, anything like that. And it would seem to indicate that she went there most likely to speak to James about the breakup, that she was let in voluntarily, and that then an argument ensued. And ultimately, she acted out of spite, out of ill will, unhappy with the response that she got, and she reacted.
She came over the home, and he continued to have his position that this relationship would not last, and that he was breaking up with her. And I think she picked up a knife and decided that if he wasn't gonna be with her, she was gonna kill him. And that's what she did. I think she was angry and frustrated and stabbed him and stabbed him and stabbed him.
Because her phone was found on scene, it would certainly indicate that she was present in the home. The blood and the spatter and the cast-off sort of indicate that prior to his death that there was an altercation in the hallway. So everything was sort of pointed at him. There was an argument, there was a confrontation, and that maybe that confrontation had gone sour.
As James lies dying on the floor of the house, Melanie flees the scene.
One of the other things police officers did that night is they located surveillance video, and it was consistent with Miss Eames' vehicle, her white vehicle, in the area, and it arrived in the area at 12:25, and then leaves 27 minutes later at 12:52. So they were able to determine, yes, we believe that Miss Eames was here. Her parents don't know where she is. She would have access to the home, familiarity with the home. James might have let her in. So at that point, she became more of a focal point, but no one knew where she was.
Detectives are about to start the search for Melanie Ean when they receive vital information as to her whereabouts.
The very next day, investigators figured out where Melanie was, and in fact, she had fled north to Maryland. She was with her family in the Silver Springs area.
She ends up at a cousin's house, a gentleman by the name of Monk, who Monk ultimately calls the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, Detective Oliver, and notifies Detective Oliver where Miss Ean is.
They go and they make contact with her. And when they make contact with her, they don't know anything about the facts and circumstances of the case. So they make a welfare check to confirm that she's there, so that Detective Oliver will fly up there if she actually is there. And so they make contact with her and they say, "Oh, are you Melanie Ean?" Because at this point her parents still have not heard from her.
Hi, Melanie.
He had the cameras rolling on his body cam. He went to the scene just to do a welfare check. When he went there, he made it clear to Melanie that she was not under arrest. He didn't want her to leave, of course, but he made it clear that he was not there to necessarily take her into custody, but rather he was there to ask some important questions.
Any other questions for us? What's going on, Melanie? Okay. What are you scared about?
She instantly started to cry. There was a showing of maybe instant remorse or sadness, or however you want to interpret it. But she started to cry. She was very emotional, and then, but the officers were not there to interrogate her. The two officers that were on the body cams, we're just here to make sure you're okay. You're not going to hurt yourself, because it was obviously she knew what she had done. Without any prompting or without any interrogation, she said, when should I come in for the questioning? Which would indicate that, one, she knows exactly why they're there and knows that she's going to be questioned about this.
I'm just wondering, when should I go in for the questioning?
Yeah, we haven't been told anything. Like I said, they just wanted us to talk to you about, make sure physically and emotionally you're fine as well.
She knows she's guilty, and it's expressed with how she acts.
Go ahead, I'm driving. I'm gonna head that way till here.
Okay, all right. Okay, hold on. Let's get a second. So we'll come back and knock on your door.
She just like a small young lady, a very nice small young lady. It was almost difficult to look at her and go, wow, you really did this.
Within 24 hours, West Palm Beach Sheriff's investigators have Detective Sean Oliver on the scene.
Detective Oliver with the Sheriff's Office immediately flies up to Maryland the day after the homicide, immediately after he's notified, and he makes contact with the police agency there. At first, they conduct some surveillance to see if she's actually at the home, see if they see anyone come out. They locate the vehicle that Miss Ean had, and immediately as he gets there, she has not left the home. She's still at the home. The car is still at the home. So he walks up and he makes contact with her, introduces himself, and speaks with her.
We need your side of the story because we have other sides of the story. Do you understand? Basically, everything shows that you just drove over there with the intention of killing James, which is really bad. But if there's something like heat of the moment, passion, you were trying to defend yourself, this is your opportunity because you're not going to get another opportunity.
We're not going to provide them with the water and things.
We're not going to provide you with water. You're just going to come to the station and talk to me.
Yeah, we're just going to talk to you. We're going to bring you right back. You're not under arrest.
Detectives, they were asking questions, and Melanie was obviously distraught. She kept saying, he broke up with me. I didn't mean to do it. So it turned out to be a confession.
Did you go over there with the intention of hurting James?
Yeah,
Okay, so it just happened. I'm assuming, is that right? You didn't do it on purpose. You didn't go over there armed with that knife because I know that knife was there when you got there. You didn't take it with you, right?
When asked how many times she stabbed him, she said she didn't know. She didn't keep count.
I'm not like that.
I'm looking at you right now.
I've never been, but I've never done anything violent before.
what was said in that statement, took her out of just being an observer to the actual perpetrator who killed James.
She was not arrested that night. She was allowed to stay in her home. At any point in time during the interview, she could have ended it. She could have asked him to leave. She could have stopped speaking to them. But instead, she participated in the interview and even got her clothing from downstairs in the basement.
However, the police seized Melanie's car.
Not only could it be a mode of transportation for her to get away, it is also something that could be evidence. The car was at the scene. It could be compared to the surveillance video and attributed in that way. It could also have blood in it. It could have evidence, additional evidence that could assist in the case.
Melanie Eames is extradited out of the state of Maryland and back to Palm Beach.
Detective Oliver, after he had the conversation with Melanie and he left, he then worked on, based on the information he'd already learned and then the information from Melanie's statement, he generated a probable cause affidavit and he got a warrant for her arrest. And he had that executed the next day in Maryland.
When police were taking Melanie back to Florida, she showed very little emotion. Really no emotion to speak of.
She remained in custody until the time of her trial.
Now she will face trial for the murder of her ex-boyfriend. It's 2018. In West Palm Beach, Florida, Melanie Eames, accused of killing her ex-boyfriend shortly after he broke up with her and then fleeing the state, is about to go on trial.
Okay. She didn't have a criminal history, which is, in our court system, evidence of character is almost never relevant. The only thing that could be relevant is a possible criminal history if she were to take the stand and testify. Given that we were most likely going to play this statement for the jury because we wanted the jury to hear the tone, wanted to hear the nature of her voice, when that happens, the likelihood of her actually taking the stand is very, very low probability. We didn't believe that her attorney would advise her, and ultimately it's her decision about whether or not to testify. But his defense really could be, he could put on his defense without subjecting her to a rigorous cross-examination. Just given her soft-spoken nature, she probably would not have held up well under a rigorous cross-examination, and she would have had to contradict everything she had already told Detective Oliver. So, from that standpoint, we really had what we needed without doing too much more, research into, what makes her tick, so to speak.
But the prosecution case hangs on just one thing.
The only real proof that they had to prove this murder case was the confession and the blouse. So I wrote a motion to suppress that her rights had been violated, and the confession and the blouse were what we call fruits of the poisonous tree and should not be used. So I went to the state attorney and said, why don't we agree that this is dispositive? If I win the motion to suppress, you have no case. If I lose it, she's going to be convicted. Well, the assistant state attorney would not agree to it being dispositive. Why was that relevant? Because you cannot plead guilty and appeal an issue. The only thing you can do under the law is you can plead no contest or nolo contendere and reserve the right to appeal. You can only do that if the state agrees it's dispositive. The state refused. The only way that we could appeal the judge's denial of the suppression motion, the judge letting in the confession and the shirt, was to go to trial.
Melanie Eames now has to face the full pressure of a public trial.
Our focus 100% is on what does the evidence say and what admissible evidence do we have, and we're trying to get bogged down in too many just speculation, things like that.
Because we had the delay of her being brought to Maryland, I went to first appearances, and for homicides, it's not that arduous of a hearing because I'm just asking that she be held no bond. She had committed a murder. She had fled immediately after. No bond is very reasonable based on the circumstances. So I asked for her to be held no bond, but I also had the opportunity to meet the family. The family was all present at the hearing, and I introduced myself and met the family, was able to explain a little bit about how the process would go and then the circumstances of the case to them.
We want the jury to hear our story and our theme at that point, and really paint the picture for them, which, in our opinion, the theme of this case was, sort of the tale as old as time, that this is a love gone sideways, this is, an angry person, and really show all the reasons why we believe that Melanie Eames had the motive to be angry, why she was the only one who would have had a reason to even be, to be confrontational with James, that nobody else, the evidence didn't point to anybody else in the house. And that's what we do. We outline for the jury in our opening statement.
Melanie's statement that she had killed James seems to be sufficient evidence of her guilt.
I absolutely knew. I knew that once I knew that in general, when a defendant makes a confession, when they make admissions like that, it is common for, if there's any way, for the defense to try to suppress those statements because they were such a strength to my case.
But despite this, the defense still questioned the role of James's mother's partner in the whole affair.
I don't have to come up with a defense. The state has 100% burden to prove the case. But several things stuck out like a sore thumb. One was why Guy Hand, the mother's boyfriend, 10 years certified in CPR, would take this bleeding young man from the floor, a hard, flat surface, to a bed, which is a mattress. He even testified in trial that as he's doing the pumping of the CPR, there's blood spurting out. That was one thing that didn't make much sense. Another thing which didn't make much sense was that Guy Hand, upon questioning, admitted to picking up the murder weapon, the steak knife. He was a butcher. The steak knife and taking it to the kitchen sink. Why?
The fact was the knife was moved. There's no disputing that. I think that the defense is doing everything they can to be as effective as possible and to question a person there as to why they would move a knife. I think it's a fair question.
One of the defense's main arguments is that Melanie had originally asked if she needed a lawyer when detectives first spoke to her in Maryland.
The defense attorney filed a motion to preclude the statement, not only based on the fact that she had used the word lawyer, but he also tried to argue that it had been a custodial interview because she was surrounded by surveillance officers in her neighborhood. At the time, Maryland had assisted in setting up, Silver Springs had set up different surveillance teams, unmarked cars, ununiformed officers that were just watching and surveilling so that they could provide Detective Oliver, should she leave, location of where she went, just so that he would know where to meet her, because he was en route from Florida. The defense attorney tried to argue that she was being confined. And so I had to present evidence and testimony from those Silver Spring officers, have them fly here and testify that they were under no direction to arrest her. Their job was simply to see where she was, take any pictures of if she exited the home, make sure that the vehicle was the vehicle that they were looking for, all of those things. So I had to go not only just based on the contents of the statement, which I argued, just based on her mannerisms, what was actually said, that she was not asking for an attorney, and that it was a willing interview. And I also utilized the fact that the surveillance team she wasn't even aware that they were there. They never made contact with her. And even if she had left, they weren't going to follow her.
For the prosecution, the case is very straightforward.
The fact of the matter is that Melanie Eames had gone through a breakup. We have actual physical evidence of that. We knew that for a fact. We knew for a fact that Melanie Eames knew for a fact that she had confessed to Sean Oliver. When you put the whole picture together, everything pointed at Melanie Eam, and nothing besides speculation pointed to Guy Hamm.
As both sides wait for a verdict, there is tension in the air.
You're always nervous because you don't know what a jury will do, but I felt strong about our evidence and our case and how the jury would respond to that.
And when the jury walks out, I mean, it's butterflies. You're anxious. You're on pins and needles. You can see the verdict move from the foreperson's hand of the bailiff to the judge. The judge is reviewing the verdict. You're trying to read the judge for any tell that he's going to give away. And when the clerk stands up and reads the verdict, that's the most alive you're going to feel. If you ever lose that, I tell the younger attorneys, if you ever lose that, it's time to go.
The judge understood and sentenced her to 50 years, which is, a significant amount of time. And I felt that he was not persuaded by her explanation.
Melanie Eam gets to spend a significant amount of the rest of her life behind bars. But does her sentencing and incarceration bring closure for anyone?
Her parents actually came up to my father, my mother, and I, and my grandma. And this is rare. This doesn't happen all the time. But they apologized for what happened. And they told us that they loved my brother and that they're so sorry. And the father wasn't there a lot growing up with her. He felt the need to tell us that he was always working and whatever. And there's a little bit of a language barrier too, but it was brief. But I will say that moment of hearing that from her family, it helped me a little bit just to kind of move on kind of thing, It was a powerful moment in our life with this horrific thing. It's a life sentence for us. It is. But I would like, if it's genuine, it would be more healing to me to see her want to improve herself and to make amends and to own what she did. To me, that's more of a healing part of this horrific thing that has happened in our life, It's too soon for me to know.